Today I'm going to be talking about colleagues that I've had over the years. And, last time I spoke about administrators, and there were dozens and dozens of administrators that I have worked with over the years. In terms of colleagues, fellow teachers, uh, librarians, guidance counselors, it's thousands. It's thousands. One school I taught at, Newtown High School, where there were, over 4,000 students, there were hundreds and hundreds of colleagues that I had there. And of course, over the years, the cast of characters would change. Teachers would retire, new people would come in, et cetera, et cetera. So it's thousands. So I just gonna kind of highlight some of the more interesting colleagues and groups of colleagues that I have worked with over the years. And I'll go back to where I started, which was at Dominican Commercial High School, the all girls Catholic high school in Jamaica, Queens. And that faculty was terrific. I mean, it was a lot of fun at Dominican Commercial. The lay faculty, the non-religious faculty, for the most part was very young, which was the case in Catholic schools because Catholic schools didn't pay much. So people would get their starts there, would stay for a period of time, and then would kind of move on to better paying positions in public schools. In any event, uh, a fun time at Dominican Commercial High School. I can remember I started there in the spring, in March, and I can remember that first year I was there in 1978, towards I guess it was towards late May, early June. The weather was warm. There's a knock on my classroom door, and so I open up the classroom door, and I'm assaulted by my fellow faculty members like John Hogan, Brian McMahon, Liz Hoey. I mean, there was a whole bunch of them, and they had water pistols, and they started blasting me with with water pistols. I'm trying to teach a class, and they're blasting me with water pistols. The girls loved it; they were all laughing hysterically, and I was kind of soaked. And they all laugh, and then they run off, and I guess they went to victimize somebody else. But it was stuff like that that wouldn't be all that unusual at Dominican Commercial High School. We had a my again it was my first year there. They had a graduation party for the class of 1978, and it was at a local tavern. Uh, I forget the I forget the name of the place, but it was a local place off of Union Turnpike, not far from St. John's University. Creighton and Gray's, I think, was the name of the place. And they had the back room, and it was the lay faculty, and it was girls from the graduating class, and drinking, food, and remember those days, 18 you could drink. So there were, we were drinking along with the graduates. It was a kind of a strange thing. I never experienced anything like that since, but that was the type of faculty it was. It was young, and it was a lot of fun. Uh, Now, what the nuns, some of them were older, and one I remember in particular was Sister Mary Charity. What a name, right? Sister Mary Charity. You won't find a nicer person than her. And she was old. I mean, she had to be in her 80s. And St. Patrick's Day, she comes in with several loaves of Irish soda bread that was fantastic. Best Irish soda bread I ever tasted. So I brought some home with me, and my wife Maureen. Wow, this is great. You got to get the recipe. So I went back in when I went back to school the next day. I saw Sister Mary Charity, and I said, "Hey, could I get the recipe?" My wife would really. Oh, of course. And she hand wrote the recipe, I brought it home to Maureen, and she's been making that Irish soda bread according to Sister Mary Charity's recipe ever since. And don't take my word for it that it's the best Irish soda bread. It was actually entered into a kind of informal Irish soda bread contest many years ago, and hands down, you had Irish soda breads made by a whole variety of different Irish women, and Maureen's was there as well, and the people who ate the different soda breads all agreed that Maureen's was the best, and of course that was Sister Mary Charity. So that was a plus. We didn't get paid much, but we got great soda bread at Dominican Commercial High School. And then uh, the second year I was there, I was there from September through January. We had a Christmas party in the gym where I used to go for dances. We used to drink a little bit before we went to the high school dances. And so now we're in this gym, and this is a party that is, was a faculty party, but it was really the nuns that arranged the party. Say, hey, okay, I'll go, maybe get something to eat or something, be okay. Had all tables set up. It was like a almost like a wedding setup with tables for 10, scattered out throughout the gym. So I'm sitting with all my friends, and I was amazed. The food was incredible, and the liquor was just top shelf stuff, and lots of it. I left that part. It was right after school. I left that party. I was what's the phrase? Two sheets to the wind, at least. Fortunately, I lived not far from the school, and I was able to. And most days I didn't drive in. I took the bus right along Jamaica Avenue, and I was able to just walk 2 blocks, get off the bus, take the bus home, and it's another block from the bus stop to get home because I was feeling no pain, I guess is the phrase that we would use. So the Dominican commercial faculty was terrific. I learned a lot there from my social studies colleagues about teaching, lesson planning, classroom management, all that. It was my first time teaching. So I'm at Dominican Commercial for that period of time, and then I get a position at St. Mary's Boys High School. So I go from an old girls Catholic high school to the old boys Catholic high school. And at the all boys Catholic high school, St. Mary's, it was also a fairly young faculty, although we did have some older men on the faculty, but it was fairly young, and it was nice. I mean, I had a good time when I was at St. Mary's. But I want to highlight a couple of the faculty members that we had at St. Mary's, and some of the things that they did. So I'm going to start with uh, Declan Larkin. Here's a photo of Declan, and we all called him Decky Larkin. And Decky was a bit of a what's the word? Oddball, little strange. Decky was very bright guy. He was the chairman of the math department. Very, very smart guy. But he was a little odd, I would say. Anyway, he was certainly paranoid, no question. As chairman of the math department, he would get textbooks, desk copies of textbooks to review, and maybe it's a book that you might want to adopt. And so these packages would come addressed to him, and he would not open any of them for fear that they were, letter bombs. So he would always he would always give the packages to another guy in the department. Uh, and Ed Tracy was his go-to guy, and Eddie would open up the packages for Decky because Decky was concerned that there might be a bomb in the packages, which was certainly paranoid. But we're now in the 1980s, and in the 1980s we had a rash, not just at St. Mary's, but at schools in the New York metropolitan area. Had a rash of bomb scares. People calling in, kids calling in, saying that they planted a bomb in the building, and then of course, what would you do? I mean, the school would have to be evacuated. Bomb squad comes, checks, makes sure there's no bomb. So you'd be out of class for whatever, however long it took, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long it took for the building to be cleared. So when there was any kind of evacuation, whether it was a fire drill, bomb scare, whatever it was, uh, the whole school would exit the building from the front, and we would go on to the field. First, it was a parking lot. Then, by the mid '80s, it was that athletic field that I talked about last time. So the whole school would be on the field, the grass field, waiting for the all clear to go in. So one day we had a bomb scare, and we're out on the field, and I'm standing next to Decky, and we're talking, and he says to me, he says, if I wanted to blow the place up, he said I wouldn't put any bombs into the uh, into the building. He said I would plant the bombs in the field and blow everybody up. That's what I would do. He says to me. I said, "Oh, really? I never thought of that. That thought never crossed my mind. But I'll tell you this: all future evacuations, fire drills, whatever they were, I did not go onto the field. I stayed off the field in the parking area in front of the building. Everybody else was on the field, not me. I'm on the asphalt off the field just in case. That's the kind of guy that Decky was. He was, like I say, he was a little different perspective on things. Now, another member of the faculty, who was a kind of an interesting guy, was Cosmo DeLillo. Here's a photo of Cosmo. Cosmo was a phys ed teacher and a lacrosse coach and a soccer coach also. Uh, he was also, so he did whatever he could to make whatever money he could. He had a family. He had like 4 or 5 kids, trying to support them on a St. Mary's salary. I don't know how he managed that, but he coached as many teams as he could. He was the supervisor of basketball officials in Nassau County. So he would be the guy that would assign game officials and so forth. He was on the phone a lot, making calls to get all that work done. So that was Cosmo. He was a maniac, basically. Taught phys ed, but he was a maniac. He used to do a thing in his phys ed classes 2 or 3 times a year, and you always knew when he was doing it because there'd be kids, bleeding all over the place. He called it anything goes basketball. And so he'd have his gym class with, I don't know, 30, 40 kids. In the gym class, he'd roll out a basketball and say, "Go ahead, anything goes. Who can score the most points?" And the kids would just go nuts and diving, crashing into people. There are no fouls or anything. It was just like this super physical game of get the ball in the basket. It was kind of like, remember the old movie Rollerball? It was kind of like that, but with no helmets, no pads, no nothing. So kids banging their heads, they're bleeding, and so forth. This was Cosmo. He was Cos DeLillo. He was a maniac, but he was a good athlete. He played baseball center field for St. John's. In any event, Cosmo was also the lacrosse coach, as I mentioned. And one afternoon, I'm sitting in the faculty lounge with Decky. And the faculty lounge there was an entrance to it that was right off the gym. If you came through that door, you were on a kind of a raised uh, platform, balcony, you know, a few steps up. It was raised, and the room was, I guess you'd call it, a sunken room. So you go down a few steps, and then you're in the faculty room, and we had a kind of a lounge area in the back with a partition that was, a little bit over your head if you were sitting down, and then the front area was tables where we would eat lunch during the day. So I'm in the back area with Decky. I don't know why. It was just the two of us. I generally tried to not spend all that much time with Decky if I could. But in any event, uh, Kaz comes in, and he comes through the door by the gym. So he's up above us, and he's got a lacrosse stick in his hand with a lacrosse ball in the net, I guess you'd call it. I don't know what you call that. Where you would catch the lacrosse ball with. And he's got a ball, and if you don't know lacrosse balls are hard. They're rubber, but they are very hard rubber balls. And Decky was sitting by the partition, I guess about, I'd estimated at about 15 to 20 feet from where Kaz was up above. And Kaz says, Decky, I'm going to part your hair. And I'm like, what's this guy going to do? He takes the lacrosse stick and he fires the lacrosse ball right to Decky. And sure enough, it goes right over Decky's head and smashes into the partition. I'm like, oh my God. If he was off by a little bit, he would have cracked Decky's head open. Well, Decky didn't like this at all. And he goes nuts. He jumps out of his seat, and now he's got this look of rage on his face. He's going to try to kill Kaz. And Cosmo, he had this maniacal laugh. Like that high-pitched maniac. He's laughing hysterically. Decky is steaming. Comes chasing after him. Cosmo goes out the door. Decky chases him. Cosmo's laughing like a maniac the whole time. And I'm just sitting there saying, man, these are my colleagues. So that was Decky and Cosmo. But ultimately, Decky got the last laugh on everybody. Decky, again, like a lot of guys, had jobs outside of school to try to make ends meet. He would caddy at one of the country clubs in Nassau County. And on one time he was caddying for these four guys, and he's listening to their conversation. And the one guy says, "Hey, look, keep this under your hat, but put together whatever money you can put together and buy MCI stock. Buy stock in MCI." MCI was a startup phone company, which had no real value because in those days, we're going back now to the early 1980s. In those days, there was only one phone company in the United States. That was what we call Ma Bell. Bell Telephone. They were the only ones. They owned every phone in the United States. Nobody owned the phone. You leased your phone from the telephone company, of which it was a monopoly control across the United States. And they had the monopoly because they were the ones initially that strung all the wires everywhere. So they were given this monopoly because they in essence created telephone service in the United States. So you had this company, MCI, that was going to challenge them. So, I mean, their stock was not worth much because how do you compete? This guy tells them that they filed a lawsuit claiming that the monopoly control that Bell Telephone had was no longer valid for whatever reason. Violation of antitrust law, whatever the case might be. And he told them they're going to win the lawsuit. They're going to win. And when they win, their stock is going to go through the roof. So Decky Didn't have much money, but he was able to scrape together a few $1,000s, I guess. And he invested in MCI. And sure enough, they won their lawsuit. The stock goes through the roof. Decky buys more and more stock on margin, and the stock continues to climb and climb and climb. He told one other person about about the stock, and that was Eddie Tracy, the guy who used to open up the packages for him. He told Eddie. Eddie bought stock as well, but he had a little bit of, he had some cold feet. But once the stock got to the point where he could sell what he bought and pay off his home mortgage, he did. So he sold pretty early, paid off his mortgage. He was happy. Decky kept investing more and more. And within a couple of years, Decky was a millionaire. And so, as crazy as Decky was, and I used to drive him to school, I would pick him up because he didn't live far from me. One time he asked me what my address was, and I didn't want to tell him where I lived. I didn't want to give him that, like, the address where I was living. I just gave him the general area. He says, "No, what's your actual address?" And I just made like I couldn't remember my address. He said, "What do you mean you can't remember your address?" I don't know. It escapes me. I didn't want to tell him where I lived, but I used to pick him up. He'd be waiting on a corner for me, and I would, because I drive down Northern Boulevard, and I would pick up Decky on the way, and he'd be out there in a coat that was taped together, and it was just, I mean, the guy didn't have much money, but he became a millionaire. He then retired, and whatever happened to Decky after that, I don't know, but he certainly had the last laugh on all of us. Now, there are two other faculty members at St. Mary's who had a kind of an interesting thing going on. That was John King and Ray Sabatello. Here's a picture of the two. John King was a phys ed teacher and coach, very athletic guy. Ray Sabatella was a math teacher who was, what's the phrase? He was full of malarkey, basically. I mean, the stories he would tell about the things he did that couldn't possibly be true. But in any case, he was tall, not athletic, but he was a basketball coach, so he played some basketball. And he made the statement that tall guys are faster than short guys. Which, what? Like, I don't know. He said because your legs are longer, and if you have longer legs, you're going to be faster. And John King was about 5'9", and Ray was about 6'2". So John says to Ray, says, "Well, I'm faster than you. You're taller than me. You got longer legs than me, but I'm faster than you." And Ray says, "No, you're not. No, you're not." He says, "I'll beat you in a race." Oh no! And they were going back and forth, debating who's faster. I said, "Hey, you don't have to debate this. There's a track outside. Have a 100-yard dash. See who's faster." So they kind of stopped, and then John says, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's go." And then Ray says, "Whoa, wait a minute. No, it's not fair." He says, "You're a phys ed teacher. You're running around all the time, and I'm hardly ever doing any running or anything." He's going on and on. So finally, they agreed that they would bet, because Ray apparently was a big gambler, if you believed his stories. So they made a bet. I don't know how much it was. It couldn't have been for much money, but they made a bet, and they set a date a couple weeks in advance, and they would go out on the track and they would have this race. And the word gets around the school that there's going to be this match race between John King, Ray Sabatella. And so when the day comes after school, the field is loaded with kids. Everybody wants to see the race. And sure enough, they go out there and they race 100 yards. And I swear to you, it ended up a dead heat. We couldn't tell who won the race. But Ray was happy that he just simply survived it, because I told him a couple days before the race. I said, he said, what could happen? Is it going to run a race? I said, well, you never know. You might pull a hamstring or something. What's the big deal? So well, if you pull a hamstring, number one, it's painful, and you're going to just crumple to the ground in pain because your leg basically isn't going to work. And he was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. So I made him a little nervous. So they had the race and didn't resolve the issue of who was faster because they came out in pretty much a dead heat. So my time at St. Mary's came to an end in 1986, and I got my first public school job at Newtown High School. And at Newtown High School, very, very good friend of mine, Bob Kunkel, was a phys ed teacher at Newtown. Here's a photo of Bob. Uh, Bob will thank me. That's a pretty good photo of Bob from back in the early 1980s. Or actually, it was probably the mid 1980s. In any case, Nick, you know why I'm laughing. Uh, in any case, I get the job at Newtown High School, and so now Bob is going to be not only my good buddy, he's also going to be my colleague. So the first day at Newtown, like is the case in every school I've ever taught at, the year opens up with a faculty meeting that's run by the principal. Now Newtown, as I said, a school of like 4,000 plus kids, hundreds and hundreds of people on the faculty just of the high school, and it's in the auditorium, and the principal is going to be up front with a microphone talking to everybody about the goals for the year and all the nonsense that principals talk about in the opening of the school. Excuse me, in the opening of the school year. So I walk in. I don't know anybody. I know Bob. I saw Bob, so I go over to sit with Bob. Big mistake. Not sitting with Bob, but Bob, of course, was sitting with his buddies who were in the phys ed department. Every school I was at prior and every school I was at since, faculty meeting, the principal is addressing the faculty, everybody's quiet, pretty much. Listening to what the principal has to say, being respectful of the principal. Not at Newtown. Not at Newtown. I couldn't believe it. It was like a circus. And the worst offenders, of course, was the phys ed department. These guys were not only talking to each other, they were yelling out across the auditorium. If somebody would walk in, "Hey, Jimmy, how you doing, buddy? How was your summer?" And he's on the other side of the auditorium, and the principal's got the microphone, and he's just going on and on, ignoring all this. And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, I'm in the middle of all this. It's my first day, not making much of an impression on the principal." But in any case, that was my first day at Newtown. But I got to tell you, I learned a lot from Bob and the other phys ed teachers at Newtown. I learned, for example, how to use a time clock. We had to punch in. So you had a time card, and you put it in the time clock, and bam, it would timestamp when you got in, and then you'd stamp at the end of the day when you left. Like we were factory workers, but everybody was required to be in the building for 6 hours and 20 minutes. That was the school day. That was the contractual length of the school day. So if you didn't have a first period class, you still had to be in at the beginning of the day. If you didn't have a last period class, you still had to stay there until the end of the day. And people would line up with their punch cards and punch out. One of the things that they taught me was, look, if you come in a little bit late, or you try to leave a little bit early, because people were on different time schedules because it was so many students, all the students couldn't be in the building at the same time in classes, so they had split schedules. Some people would come in at 7:30, other people would come in around 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. And then you would leave at different times. So they said, what you do is When you put your card in the slot in the time clock, you put it in, it punches. If you put it in like this, boom, 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 and you look at the time, all you see is a blob of ink. And you can't distinguish it because every stamp is going to be a little bit different, a little bit off, a little to the left, a little to the right, a little higher, a little lower, and you just get this blob in there. And you punched in, but no one can read what that time is. So that was an interesting technique that I did use from time to time when I was at Newtown. They eventually did away with time clocks years later in some contractual arrangement. We didn't have to punch in any longer. Uh, Another thing I learned at Newtown, again, taught to me by either Bob himself or one of the guys in the phys ed department. Uh, we had to cover classes of absent teachers. They called them coverages at St. Mary's. They called them substitutions, whatever it was. But I had to do coverages, and it was a pain in the neck because covering a class as a sub, you got no juice, you got no power over these kids, and they know it. And it was always a pain in the neck. Kids misbehaving, and it was a disaster. And I'm talking about this, and I said, well, Tony, first of all, you're not doing it right. So what do you mean I'm not doing it right? How do you do it? He said, this is how you do it. Every classroom had a front door and a back door. So if you're covering a class, wait until after the bell rings. Don't get there early. Get there, maybe a minute after the bell rings. And go in the back door and leave the back door open. And then walk to the front. You're gonna have something that the teacher left, some kind of assignment or something that the kids are supposed to do during that period. So walk right to the blackboard. Don't turn around, look at the class. Keep your back to the class, and slowly write the assignment, whatever it is, on the blackboard. And I do that, and as I'm doing that, exactly what the guys told me. He said, you're gonna hear the pitter patter of little feet as the kids exit the back door, which you left open. And then when you finish writing on the board, you turn around and you're going to have maybe 4 or 5 kids in the room. And those are going to be the nicest kids because they didn't want to cut the class. So they're going to sit there, they're going to do the assignment, and it's going to be a piece of cake. And they were absolutely right. So after that, covering classes became a non-issue. I mean, was that the ethical thing to do? I guess probably not. But the kids that left the room, they weren't going to be doing any of that assignment anyway. They were just going to be pains in the neck. So they were gone. Years later, when I was at Jericho, I was coaching at the time, and we used to coach. I had a coach. I was coaching baseball, the assistant varsity baseball coach, and we had practices on Saturday mornings. So I'm driving from my house in Whitestone to Jericho. So I'm driving I take the Cross Island Parkway, I get on the Long Island Expressway, and I head east to Jericho. And there's no traffic. It's Saturday morning. It's like 8:30, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. I guess practice started at 9, so 8:30 or so, I'm on the highway. And the Cross Island is all backed up. What is going on? And I'm looking ahead, and you could see there wasn't like traffic ahead. There was something that was kind of clogging things up. And so I'm kind of making my way through the traffic to see what in the world is going on. And I see there's a car in the center lane of the Cross Island Parkway. Where the speed limit is in the city, so the speed limit is 50, but most people are doing 60, 65 on the Cross Island because generally there's no traffic on a Saturday morning. But not this morning. There's some guy in the center lane who's driving like 40 miles an hour or something, and it's jamming everything up because the lanes on the Cross Island are pretty tight. So I make my way around, and I'm in the right lane. I want to get a look at this guy who's jamming up the traffic. And who is it? It's my good buddy Bob. And he's driving, he's eating a jelly donut And whenever he ate a jelly donut, you could tell he's got the two fingers, and he's got his a couple of fingers, and he's got his pinky up, and he's eating the jelly donut, trying to be very careful not to let any of the jelly spill out onto his jacket. God, I couldn't believe it. I see him and I beep, and he looks at me, and of course I give him the one finger salute and head off to Jericho. When I get there, of course, I'm late, and it's the worst thing in the world to be late for baseball practice. The coach just laid into the kids for getting there late, and I come strutting in like 5 minutes after he screamed at everybody, and I'm also late. So thank you, Bob. You gave me some good advice, but then not so good on my way to baseball practice. So that was Newtown High School. I leave Newtown High School and I end up at I go to I should end up I go to Townsend Harris. I go to Holy Trinity, then I go to Townsend Harris, and then as you know I'm accessed from Townsend Harris and I end up at August Martin High School, the school in South Jamaica near Kennedy Airport, named after the first commercial airline pilot, black commercial airline pilot in the United States. And it was the building was beautiful. It was an old building, but it was well maintained. It was beautiful. It was right across the street from Baisley Pond Park. Just lovely. They had a couple of different faculty lounges, work areas, cafeterias throughout the building that we used. And I discovered one of them that was the most unique faculty room I've ever seen. It had a section of an airplane fuselage in the middle of the room, kind of on an angle. And you go inside of it, and it's set up like a living room. It had couches, it had lounge chairs. You had no overhead lights, so you had lamps and tables. It was terrific. On the outside of it, you had copy machines, and the copy machines were mimeograph machines. So I would go in there every morning after my first period class, and I would use the mimeograph machine to make whatever copies I needed for the rest of the day. And it was those old crank mimeograph machines. And then I would then go into the fuselage, grab a lounge chair, turn off the lamp, and take a nap for about 25 minutes or so. It was wonderful. Never saw that any other place that I went to. But side note, uh, that ability to use a mimeograph machine, which I had used at Dominican Commercial, I used them at St. Mary's, I used them there at August Martin High School, turned out to be a very valuable thing for me when I was at the City University of New York's Graduate Center in my doing my doctoral studies. I put in for work study. Why not? Maybe I'll get something help defray the cost of the tuition, which was pretty low because it was City University. I get a phone call from the president of the Sociology Student Association, and he says, "I see you put in for work study." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I also see you're a teacher." I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "You know how to use one of those mimeograph machines?" I said, "Yeah, I know how to use it every day." So he said, "Well, we put out a newsletter once a month, and we need somebody to kind of crank out a couple hundred copies, 200 copies or so of the newsletter every month, and it's 2 or 3 or 4 pages long." He said, "Would you be able to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, man, I did that every day. Yeah, I could absolutely do that." And he said, "Well, we can't pay you, but uh, we will cover your tuition and fees for every semester that you do that." I'm your guy. So I did that, and I didn't have to pay tuition after that first semester. So that was quite a plus. But that was the high skill of being able to operate a mimeograph machine. But back at August Martin, There was another faculty room that I would use in the afternoon to eat lunch. That faculty room had a refrigerator, had microwave, sink, and so forth that the other one did not have. So when I got in first thing in the morning, I always brought my own lunch uh, everywhere. From the time I was a kid in school, right through my last day at Jericho, I brought my lunch with me. I didn't eat the cafeteria food ordinarily. Uh, Occasionally I would at Newtown especially, but I digress. So I bring my lunch in a brown paper bag, and I leave it in the refrigerator like everybody else. And after a few weeks, someone is going into my lunch bag and taking out not the sandwich. They would leave the sandwich, but they would take out, like if I had a piece of fruit in there, they would take that out. If I had a piece of cake in there, they would take that out and then leave the rest. Who the hell is doing this in the faculty room? I couldn't figure it out. It could have been any number of people. So what I started to do was I would roll up the top of the bag and then I put a rubber band around it, put it in the refrigerator. That stopped the problem. After I put the rubber band on the lunch bag, whoever this thief was who was taking my fruit and cake stopped doing it. So that was a kind of a simple little security technique that I had developed, the rubber band thwarting the lunch bag thief at August Martin High School. Now I did spend one summer at Jamaica High School doing summer school, and I took the job there because it was close to my house. It was 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away. Had a parking lot, so it was easy to get there, easy to park. And the classes ran, I think, from 8:30 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. So it was pretty quick, easy, 3 classes, hour and a half each, and then I'm home by quarter after 1. So it was fine. Uh, the principal of the summer school was an assistant principal at Townsend Harris, who obviously knew me. So he decides that he's going to put me in charge of the social studies regents, of both the administration of the regents, getting the papers out, to the classrooms, no big deal there. And then I would be the coordinator of the marking of the regents. Okay, that's a bit of an issue because now I got to deal with other teachers and make sure they're working and so forth. So anyway, the day of the regents comes. In those days, it was just the one regents, just the American history regents. Uh, and so the Regents was an afternoon Regents, which meant that it started at 1 and ended at 4. So I asked the assistant principal what time, when did he need the grades? And he tells me 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock that night? Yeah, 9. We need them 9 o'clock that night. The exam ends at 4 in the afternoon. And there were hundreds of exams. And in those days, each American history exam had 3 essay questions on it. So I said, it's impossible. I said, we can't possibly read all those papers, all those essays, and get the grades in 5 hours. It's just not possible. He said, oh no, no, no. He says, don't read them, just mark them. Oh, how silly of me. Don't read them, just mark them. So there we go. So now we're gonna mark these exams as quickly as we can, and we did. And sure enough, because we had to be done by 9 o'clock, that was it. No one was coming to work the next day. The only people who came to work the next day were the administrators. This was the last day for teachers, so you had to get them done by 9 o'clock, and that was it. There was no good. There wasn't going to be any extensions, and so we did. So we learned how to mark Regents exams really, really quickly. Uh, as I said, thousands of colleagues, and I don't have enough time to go through the rest that I want to talk to you about. So I'm gonna stop this part here, and next time I'm gonna take a look at more discussion of marking regents exams, which was a thing in and of itself, where working with colleagues marking those exams. And then I'm going to take a look at the colleagues that I had at Townsend Harris High School, and I'll talk about all of that next time. So thanks for watching. Remember, if you like this stuff, feel free to share it. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So enjoy, and have a great weekend. And I'll be back next week with part two of the colleagues installment. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.